Good morning, my friends. I'm a little frazzled today. My hair's wet. I'm running late. My glasses, I think, are probably, I didn't clean them before I started. So, anyway, but such as I am, here I am. So, I'm just waiting for my friends. Catherine! Yay! She's my favorite. She's always on time or pretty close to on time. So, good to see you all. I hope you are all bearing up. Um, Last day of March, and I opened my door, and what did I see? About 3 inches of snow. It was very disconcerting. But it seems like small problems compared to others, what others are dealing with, and it's certainly very pretty. Um, Oh, good. So good to see you. Hi, Kathy from Arizona. I hope it's warmer in Arizona. Hi, Carla. Always love seeing you. Roxanne, hi there. It's always nice to see familiar faces. Today we are going to be reading chapters 16 and 17. And then, I did want to point out today's digital resource. Debbie Maycumber has a digital magazine called Welcome Home. And, I think all of us are looking for ways to help in this really hard time. My way was to read this book. Debbie's was to pull together very quickly a bonus free issue of her Welcome Home magazine. She asked me to write a piece for it, which I did with some riveting reads for armchair travel is in that. But it's got an exclusive short story from Debbie, lots of recipes, and tons of really helpful articles from her writer friends. So if you'd like to get that, there is a link in the show notes. All you have to do is register, and then it's a digital magazine. It's not a physical magazine. There's been some confusion. If you go down, scroll down, once you get to that page, you'll see Debbie in a yellow blouse, and there's little arrows on the left and right sides that'll help you navigate the pages. So take a look at that. I thought it was a really good issue, and it's her gift to you and kind of her author friend's gift to you too. All right, here we are, the book, A Single Thread. Today we are reading chapters 16 and 17. Are you ready? I remembered my tea this time, so I'm ready. Here we go. Chapter 16, Evelyn Dixon. There, I snapped on the light in the dark workroom. That's better. I'd set 4 rolling chairs around the sides of the cutting table and positioned a sewing machine behind each chair so everyone could easily move from the table to the machines and back. Additionally, I'd set up 2 ironing boards in the corners of the room. In the center of the table, I'd placed a basket with rulers, markers, template plastic, seam rippers, and scissors. Each spot was supplied with a new rotary cutter and mat, a box of silk pins, a project bag, and a stack of pattern books that I'd felt might appeal to each of the 3 women. Abigail and Margot looked a little confused, but Liza, already in on the surprise, was grinning from ear to ear. Don't you get it? We're starting a quilt circle. Evelyn is going to help us make quilts. That's right, I confirmed. Now, instead of going over the books on Friday nights, we can relax and enjoy each other's company while we work on our quilting projects. Of course, tonight's dinner was a little more elaborate than I can manage on a weekly basis, but I'm sure we'll be able to rustle up something in the way of provisions. Margot looked pleased, but a little concerned, too. Evelyn, this is sweet of you, but do you really think you have time for this? Even without the surgery coming up, you've got a lot on your plate, and you're teaching classes 3 nights a week as it is. Now you want to take on another class? Besides, she protested, what would we do about our Friday night business meetings? But this isn't a class. I'll be here to help and advise, but I'll be working on a project of my own, just like the rest of you. It'll be as much fun for me as for you. And believe me, I could use a little fun right now. I laughed, but Margot's brow remained furrowed. Margot, at first we needed those weekly meetings, but now you know everything there is about running cobbled court quilts. You can probably do it better than I can. She started to deny this, but I interrupted. Besides, you and I see each other practically every day anyway. We can discuss the business during business hours. There's no point in boring poor Abigail with this. She's on so many other boards and committees in town, doing things that can affect the lives of hundreds of people, not just mine. I appreciate all her help, but she's done her part. She has other commitments, important ones. She can't be involved in the day-to-day operating of the quilt shop. Abigail didn't say anything about this one way or the other, as was her style, but I read a flash of appreciation in her eyes. I meant what I said. During one of our morning coffee dates, Charlie told me about the extent of Abigail's charity work. Her contributions, monetary and otherwise, clearly had a huge impact on the community. Of course, some of that may have been for appearance sake, writing the right checks to the right organization, showing up at the right parties. But I couldn't believe anyone, even someone as wealthy as Charlie said Abigail was, would be so generous with her money and time unless she really wanted to help people. I wanted Abigail to know that I truly appreciated her generosity, and not just to me. She deserved my gratitude and my respect. It was too bad her niece didn't share my feelings. I knew that Liza didn't get much affirmation from her aunt, but clearly that was a two-way street. They were so much alike, those two. The physical resemblance was striking, of course. They had the same high cheekbones, the same piercing gaze and beautiful complexions, the same graceful, loping gait, leading from the hips like off-duty runway models. But there was so much more that they shared. It was impossible not to be drawn to them, curious to know what made them tick. But they each put up walls to keep others from getting too close. Liza's, constructed from an off-putting combination of goth clothing, ripped jeans, and stony stares with a thick coating of hard-edged attitude to fill in any chinks, was easy to spot. Hers was the armor angry, hurting teenage girls had been donning for generations. As I recall, I had adopted a similar stance myself for a time, but thankfully, as most girls do, I'd thrown it off in adulthood. Someday I hoped Liza would do the same. Abigail was different. Her personal barrier was harder to identify and to penetrate, an irresistible but blinding beam of light that drew people close but kept them from getting too close. Abigail's wall was composed of equal parts unquestionable generosity, impeccable manners, and an astounding gift for getting information from others without giving any herself. She was incredibly skilled at this. I'd seen her in action. But I wasn't convinced that she actually wanted most of what people so readily handed her. She was just out to charm them, to dazzle them into believing that she was deeply interested in them, and so could add them to her extensive collection of admirers, trinkets for her charm bracelet. I know that this makes Abigail sound cold and calculating, her alluring veneer just a cover for a manipulative personality, but it was more complicated than that. If she had been merely manipulative, people would have seen through her ruse years before. It was impossible to hide something like that for long, especially in a small town, and Abigail had lived in New Bern most of her life. I felt certain that a genuinely kind, compassionate person was trapped behind Abigail's magnetic but impenetrable wall, fighting to get out. The same was true of Liza. They were so similar, so scarred, and so alone. Yet they were family. They lived in the same house. What was it that kept them from acknowledging what was good in the other, from comforting each other? I wondered if the death of Liza's mother had something to do with it. I knew Susan had passed little more than a year before. It seemed to me that whatever was keeping them apart had been in place for many years, but there was no way of knowing for sure. Liza's hesitancy to respond to Margot's question about her mom, and Abigail's rapid and deft repositioning of the conversation said it all. Liza and Abigail didn't agree on much, but in this they were united. The Burgess family secrets would stay secret. Thank you, Evelyn, you're right. My calendar is full of commitments at the moment, and the shelter may have a new capital campaign in the offing that will require more of my attention, so I hope you'll understand why I need to bow out of your little quilting circle. She looked at her watch. Really, I should be going. I didn't realize it was so late. I promised to drop by Elena and Link Bergsted's house. They're hosting a benefit for the New Bern Historic Association. Already seated and flipping through pattern books, Liza puffed contemptuously. Yeah, right. I'm sure they won't be able to hold one more charity auction and booze fest without your direct participation. Liza, that's not very nice. Margot chastised her, but gently. I was glad she'd said something, otherwise I would have, probably less diplomatically. Like Evelyn said, Abigail's work is very important and helps all kinds of people. I really enjoyed getting to spend time with her these last weeks, but doesn't have the time to be part of our quilt circle. Well, we should just respect that. Really, Abigail, we understand, but we'll miss you. She walked across the room and gave Abigail a hug that Abigail tolerated, but briefly. I smiled. Margot was such a dear and such a contradiction in terms. She was a business genius with a heart of gold, brilliant in strategy and execution, but utterly kind-hearted, looking out for the best in everyone. I wondered if that was what was keeping her from finding a job in the city. An interviewer would only have to spend 5 minutes with her to know that she was completely lacking in killer instinct or guile, commodities that were highly valued in most corporations. I hadn't paid myself in months, but if ever Cobbled Courts could afford to hire an employee, Margot would be my first choice. Not that I could afford to pay her anything like what she was worth. Even very successful quilt shops can't compete with corporate pay packages. But if I could, she'd be worth it. Margot, Liza, why don't you keep looking through the books? Figure out what projects you might want to start while I walk Abigail to the door. I'll be right back. I left the workroom and Abigail followed, politely thanking me for a lovely evening and just as politely apologizing for the necessity of her departure. Really, Evelyn, it was such a considerate thought on your part, but as I said, I'm really too busy to add yet another obligation to my schedule. I stopped in the middle of the darkened shop and turned, standing face to face with Abigail, sandwiched between rows of fabric bolts. She couldn't move in any direction unless she actually backed away from me, and I knew that her sense of propriety wouldn't permit her to do anything so rude. Abigail, is that what you think? That I want to saddle you with one more obligation? That's not it at all. I was trying to give you a gift of time, a few hours each week to do something that I think you'd enjoy. I meant what I said in there. The extent of what you do for all kinds of people in this town? I shook my head in amazement. Well, I just wouldn't like to think of what kind of place New Bern would be without you. That's why I think this would be good for you. I think it would give you a much-deserved break after a busy week, something fun and relaxing. She stood still for a moment. I couldn't tell what she was thinking, but somehow or other I'd said something that struck a chord. That's very considerate of you, truly it is, but I don't think I'd be very good at it. My talents are more philanthropic than artistic. She paused for a moment, and her tone softened. Susan was the creative one. It was the first time I'd heard Abigail refer to her sister by name. Abigail, everybody has a creative side. It's just that most people don't tap into it. I wasn't sure what to say next, but I sensed a definite wavering in her resistance. What could I say that would change her mind? Besides, Abigail, you are such a generous person, and quilts make wonderful gifts. There really is nothing that shows your concern and love the way a quilt does. Not flowers, not money, nothing. It doesn't matter if your quilt is perfectly sewn or the colors aren't exactly right. That's not the point. When you give someone a quilt, they know that you care about them, even if you can't find the words to say so. Is there someone like that in your life? I was thinking of Liza. Someone you'd like to encourage? She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, well, there's a little girl I met a few days ago, Bethany. She took my hand, held on to me while she showed me around her house. I didn't ask her, she just did. She had yarn ribbons in her pigtail, one blue and the other green, because those were her favorite colors, she said. I wonder. I could hear her breathing slowly, trying to keep the catch from her voice. I wonder if she might like a quilt, a blue and green one, for her new home. That is chapter 16. I'm going to get a quick drink and we'll go on to the next one. Abigail's such an interesting character, don't you think? She really is very complicated, and she just kind of emerged on the page. It was interesting. It would have been easy to kind of write a wealthy, snobby woman, but there's a lot of layers to her. She is an onion. Anyway, comments from the author. All right, are you ready for chapter 17? Let's do it. Chapter 17, Evelyn Dixon. Initially, Abigail wanted to pick a more complicated pattern, but with some prodding from me, finally chose a simple friendship star as the base block for her quilt. When it is finished, this block looks more like a pinwheel than a star, a pattern certain to appeal to a child. Abigail chose the fabrics herself, 9 brilliant shades of blue from cobalt to turquoise, and an equal number of vibrant greens from emerald to lime. I was surprised, considering that Abigail's wardrobe centered on a subdued palette of black, gray, and earth tones, with an occasional accent of red or burgundy in the fall, that she would pick such bright colors, but her choices were right on the mark. By the time she'd sewn the first couple of blocks, it was obvious that the quilt would be darling when it was finished, like a garden of gaily colored pinwheels planted in a field of white, spinning on the breath of an invisible wind. It had the potential to be such a happy quilt. Too bad that Abigail couldn't manage to relax and be happy with it. It was the day before Thanksgiving and 4 days after my lumpectomy. Even though I'd protested that I was feeling much better, Margot insisted that someone sit with me during the day, just in case you need anything. If I needed anything, all I had to do was holler down the stairs where either she or Liza was busy tending to customers, but that didn't seem to matter to Margot. I knew that Dr. Finney said I should accept all offers of help that came my way, but right now I just wanted to be alone. Margot meant well, and I was so very, very grateful for everything she'd done for me. But sometimes I felt as if I had suddenly regressed to childhood and a pretty 30-something blonde marketing manager had become my mother, supervising my care and feeding with all the attention and intensity she had given to running a Fortune 500 corporation. Sometimes her solicitousness got on my nerves. It didn't help that I was still sore and tired from the surgery and on tenterhooks waiting for Dr. Finney to call with the post-surgical test results. Why did it have to take so long? Every time the phone rang, I jumped. And every time it turned out to be someone other than the doctor, I became more and more irritable. I'd never have imagined I'd be saying this, but I was grateful that it was Abigail on babysitting duty that day. Margot was sweet, but her constant hovering and strained attempts at cheery conversation were tiring, and Liza became distant after the operation, sitting quietly in a chair and barely speaking to me, as if she was afraid of saying something wrong. Charlie came over on the days when the restaurant was closed, but he was nervous without anything to do, so after a few minutes ended up in the kitchen clanging pots and chopping things and making elaborate meals I was too tired to consume. Abigail alone seemed to realize that I was sick of people talking about me or my cancer, or even worse, pretending not to talk about those things. Either that or she truly was absorbed in her quilting project. Whatever the reason, she brought her quilting along and started working on it. I did the same, appliquing holly leaves on a Christmas tree skirt I hoped to finish before the holidays. It was a relief just to sit in silence and stitch, focusing on something other than the cancer, if only for a few minutes. But before long, I was just too sore and tired to sew. I put the half-finished skirt on the table next to the sofa where I was reclining and closed my eyes. Abigail looked up from her work. "Does it hurt? Do you want a pain pill?" "No," I said with my eyes still closed. "It's not time yet. I'm just taking a break." I opened my eyes and saw Abigail bent over her work again, ripping the seam out of a block she'd just finished. I noticed that the edge of the fabric was frayed. "Abigail, why are you ripping that out? It looks fine." She pursed her lips, displeased, and went on ripping. "No, I measured it, and this side is 1/8 of an inch narrower than the other. The point doesn't look anything like the rest." I scooted back on the sofa, shifting myself so I sat up straighter on the mound of pillows wedged behind my back, and peered at the half-disassembled quilt block. Honestly, I couldn't see what she was talking about. "How many times have you taken that block apart and put it back together?" This will be 4, she said, pursing her lips, but still not looking up. Well, no wonder your seams are off. Look at how the edge is all frayed. Taking a seam out once is fine if there really is a problem, but if you do it over and over, you stretch the fabric out of shape and it just gets worse. Abigail sighed. Well, I guess I'll just have to cut out a whole new block and start over. She tossed the block aside with a disgusted look on her face. I thought you said quilting was supposed to be relaxing. It is, I said, and then added silently, at least if you're not quite so anal, it is. Let me see that. I reached over, picked up the discarded block, and examined it carefully. Abigail, this is fine. You'd have to put your face right next to it to see the difference between the two sides. Just sew the seam back up and start on the next block. She shook her head firmly. No, I'll cut another one. I want it to be perfect. What do you mean you want it to be perfect? Perfect as in every single block is like every other? Perfect as in a machine could have done it? If you're trying for that, you've missed the whole point of quilting, especially hand quilting. You don't want it to be sloppy or carelessly made, but you do want this quilt to express your personality, to be authentic, to show that a real human being made it with real human hands. Otherwise, what is the point? You just buy her something in a store ready-made, for heaven's sakes. I was on a roll. This was one of my pet peeves. When people took something as beautiful and creative, as human as quilting and tried to turn it into yet one more modern expression of faux perfection. Evelyn, no, I said irritably. Let me talk. Do you know that some of the most prized quilts, priceless quilts, are hanging in museums today are full of wobbly seams and mismatched fabrics? And they are beautiful, not because they are perfectly constructed, but because Abigail got up from the wing chair she'd been sitting in and walked into the kitchen. Evelyn, your phone is ringing. She picked it up after listening for a moment and said, Yes, she's here. Just a moment, please. Dr. Finney, she mouthed silently as she handed me the phone, and then, without asking, walked quietly to the apartment door and down the stairs into the shop, giving me my privacy. Hello, this is Evelyn. Hi, Evelyn. It's Dr. Finney. I've got your reports back. Would you like to come into the office and discuss them? My stomach knotted and my heart beat faster. When the news is good, they don't ask you to come into the office and talk about it. I knew that by now. No. It's bad, isn't it? I want to know now. I don't want to wait. All right, I understand. Evelyn, we didn't get clean margins, she said flatly. There is still cancer in the breast. Oh, God, I whispered and closed my eyes. God. I know, Evelyn. I'm sorry, she said, and then took a breath. And I am afraid there's more. The MRIs we took right before your surgery showed some suspicious-looking lesions in the other breast, too. We're going to have to do a biopsy. It may be nothing, but there's no way of knowing for sure until we do the testing. I don't understand. Why didn't this show up before? The equipment we have at the hospital is more advanced. That's why I ordered the test. I know this all comes as a shock, but it's a good thing that we caught it now. Yes, I see. I wanted to cry, but couldn't. The disbelief, the disappointment, the fear was a building pressure at the back of my brain and my eyes. It hurt to speak or to think, but I had to. What now? I'd like to see you as soon as possible to perform the biopsy and just to talk things over. I can see you tomorrow morning if you'd like. Tomorrow? But tomorrow's Thanksgiving. Is it that bad? What aren't you telling me? Oh, no, it's nothing like that, she assured me. Truly. As I told you before, this is a fairly slow-growing cancer. There is no rush. I just didn't want you to have to wait. I know how nerve-wracking that can be. Maybe you'll be able to enjoy your holiday if you had a chance to talk this out and get the ball rolling on the biopsy. If it would help, I'd be happy to see you tomorrow. And I knew she meant it. She was so kind. But all the labs will be closed tomorrow, won't they? Unless you can perform the biopsy, run the lab tests, and write the report yourself before the turkey comes out of the oven, I don't think there's much point. It's fine, Deanna, really. Have dinner with your family, and I can see you on Friday. All right, if you're sure. But Evelyn, if you change your mind or have any other questions, you just give me a call. I already gave you my home number and cell phone, didn't I? Yes, I wrote them down in my address book. Good. Don't be shy about using them. I'll see you on Friday at 9. Will that work for you? Friday at 9. I'll be there. Normally, I wrote down all my appointments, but I didn't have a pen handy. Besides, there was no chance that I'd forget. The next 40 hours would just be a countdown to Friday at 9. See you on Friday, Evelyn. Happy Thanksgiving. I hung up. Happy Thanksgiving, I said to the empty air, and sat holding the phone to my chest and staring out the window. After a few minutes, I heard a movement behind me. The door opened a crack. May I come in? Abigail asked. When I didn't answer, she opened the door and came to stand beside me. What did she say? Lines of genuine concern creased a spot in the center of her brow. Abigail's face always had such a capable expression, but there was no trace of that now. Just like me, she didn't seem to know what to do next. Is anything wrong? Shall I call Margot? No, I said. Nothing's wrong. The pain from the incision made me wince a little as I got to my feet. What are you doing? She asked nervously. What do you need? Tell me and I'll get it for you. I walked slowly to the kitchen. I'm fine. It's Wednesday. And I just remembered I want to make a turkey. You want to what? She gasped, following close behind as I shuffled my way to the refrigerator. I want to make a turkey, I repeated, and a pumpkin pie. What are you doing for Thanksgiving, Abigail? That is all for today, my dear friends. As far as the reading, I hope you enjoyed that. I enjoyed reading it to you. I was doing my devotions this morning and I came across, I've been using this little booklet that my church handed out really 4 months ago. And in some of the things for today, you know, we're in Lent, and I thought there was such an interesting kind of prophetic thing in here. I thought I would read it to you. So it's talking about, you know, it gives you suggestions for things you do during Lent. And here's one thing it said: suggested fast, shopping for non-essentials. Consider fasting from shopping for anything that is not absolutely necessary this week. Reflect on the ways that God has provided for your every need. You could choose to start a list of God's provision in your life. Spend time praying for God to help you remember that He is your ultimate sustainer and giver of life, or find small ways to be generous toward others in gratitude for what the Lord has given you. That I thought was just an amazing, I underlined it like 5 times. So with that in mind, I found some verses today that I thought were pretty great in Philippians 4, 6, and 7. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. I thought that was a pretty great verse for today. Well, my friends, I will see you tomorrow for the next 2 chapters for Hump Day, Wednesday. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope you just maybe take that to heart today. It's hard sometimes to remember all we have, but we do have a lot to be grateful for in spite of all the difficulties that are going on right now. So I'm going to try and think about that today, and I hope you do the same. I will see you tomorrow, my dear friends.